So Prabhupada spent about an hour answering questions. Then we had another kirtan, we distributed prasadam, and then we went back to the temple in Vyomstrata.
I was a very young student. I was 17 years old, and I was very much interested in looking for some serious answer, real answer. Because I born in Assisi, I was willing to join the monks there. I started to become a monk. But then I became discouraged because everything was very mysterious, no answer to my questions, about death, about life after death, no answer. And I discovered the temple was just very close to my house, very 100 meters. So they invited me for the Sunday feast. Because I just arrived there, I never saw them before. And I went to the Sunday feast, and practically I joined almost immediately. And I stayed there up to midnight. So Mahaprabhu was, the devotee was preaching to me. And immediately we became very close friends. And after a month, Prabhupada arrived in the beginning of May. The first impression I had that the devotee, they were working so hard, for Prabhupada's arrival. Working day and night, especially Somaka Prabhu. So much love the devotee they had for Prabhupada. I never saw anything similar before. And that love impressed me even more when Prabhupada arrived. Because I remember there were many devotees coming from all over Europe. And when he arrived, everybody crying. All the devotees, maybe 150 devotees, everybody crying, chanting and crying. Such a deep affection, such a deep love, And I saw a very, very deep relationship. And what impressed me, another thing, that Prabhupada arrived in Rome, coming from Delhi, from India. Immediately he went to the temple, and I was so impressed how very slowly he paid his obeisances with such a deep devotion. We had Gornitai just installed a few days before. And immediately after, he sat on the Vyasasan, and he gave a class, he gave a speech to the devotees. I thought he's coming from long distance. He must be very tired, and he was traveling in the night, but he was very fresh. Everybody so enthusiastic. Such an unbelievable atmosphere. I mean, I was becoming convinced very quickly that he was in touch with God. So I got such clear information from Prabhupada's philosophy. I became immediately convinced by the philosophy. And when I saw Prabhupada, I saw very, very powerful person. And my eyes, my heart, my consciousness became completely attracted. That week changed completely my life, completely. And I can see after, more than 30 years that Prabhupada has become the main thing in my life. The day I became initiated, I felt not part anymore of this world. And I had the fortune to distribute Prabhupada's books for many years. I always faced many difficulties. They put me in jail. As soon as I joined, I stayed 1 month in jail because I was doing something on the street. I was 1 year in Greece doing something on the street. A couple of times somebody tried to kill me with a knife. I don't feel difficulties. Thanks to Prabhupada's mercy. It completely changed my life forever.
We went for different morning walks in different historical parts of Rome, the Colosseum. He turned to me and said, "What is this?" I said, "Well, this is an old Roman ruin where they used to hold games, entertainments, like a big entertainment theater." And Prabhupada said, "And what is the purpose of it now?" I said, "Well, it's considered an historical monument." And then Prabhupada asked me, "Are there any toilets inside?" I said, "No, there's no toilets." He said, "What is the point of maintaining such a huge building and you can't even go to the toilet?" He was just joking, obviously, but... And then we took him to this place called Eor, which is a new development that came up during the time of Mussolini. And it's a type of architecture called fascist architecture. And there was very tall buildings there. And Prabhupada commented, he said, "Just see, they have not learnt from their mistakes. They have this big historical building which is useless called the Colosseum, and still they're making big skyscrapers. And what is the use of these skyscrapers? Is simply increasing their eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. This is useless civilization. They're not learning anything. This is just simply chewing the chewed. We had this house that Prabhupada stayed in. He stayed with us for 9 days. It was a detached house with its own garden. And Prabhupada very much liked the weather there. All the neighbors on that street, that small street where the temple was in Vyamastreta, would come every morning, knowing exactly what time Prabhupada was going to go for his morning walk. And they would be standing in line, ready to offer Prabhupada a freshly picked flower from their gardens. And some were also offering fruits to him too. They were so respectful. Prabhupada had a very nice impression. Actually, he said the Italians, they're religious by nature. They desire the blessings of God. And it's up to us as devotees to teach them how to become qualified to get those, those blessings.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare.
Now, here we are. This is entering the city hall of Geneva. This is Srila Prabhupada being shown through the entranceway. And somehow or other we managed to have Srila Prabhupada received as a dignitary in the large capitals of Europe. That happened in Rome, it happened in Geneva, it happened in Paris. And this is a telling moment. Here you see Srila Prabhupada seated while the mayor of Geneva issues his greeting. And that's Guru Gauranga translating the mayor's remarks from French to English. And often there would be a declaration or some kind of plaque or something that would be handed over as a way of acknowledging Srila Prabhupada's visit to the city. And then Srila Prabhupada would reply, commenting, as he often did on such occasions, about the duty of good government to train citizens in what is spiritual life. Also warning that any government that does not take the responsibility seriously is a hellish government. I remember that caused some consternation in Paris when he was received at the city hall there. The mayor got very nervous.
2 French reporters came to visit Prabhupada. One was an older man and one was a woman probably in her early 30s. Prabhupada didn't tell pastime stories. Mostly preached about you're not that body, a lot of philosophical things. But he didn't generally tell so many stories. And this woman was sitting there and he starts telling her this story about how this demon kidnapped 16,000 princesses. And Krishna finally came and killed the demon. And the princesses approached Krishna because they were really attracted to Krishna. And Krishna looked at them and he said, "Come on." And that's how Krishna ended up with 16,000 wives. So as I'm listening to the story, I'm thinking, this is a pretty incredible story to tell a reporter, especially in the Western culture where everything is so rationalistic. But he told that story, and when he quoted Krishna as saying, "Come on," that reporter's face lit up as only a woman who had some experience in the world of heartbreak could understand. And even though the number of wives may have sounded so incredible, that affection he had towards those princesses touched that woman's heart. And she just lit up. It was beyond the rational. It was just on the level of an appreciation of the loving heart of Krishna by this very intelligent, very sophisticated French reporter. And it was a very wonderful moment.
I remember Prabhupada in a small temple in Switzerland. At one time he gave a class and he was describing how we should build a very nice single sign in our heart. and invite Krishna there. It should be as beautiful as we can. It can be in gold, it can be in jewels, diamond, and we should sit him there and then worship him. It was very impressive. I remember also asking Nitai, who was Prabhupada's secretary at the time, did Prabhupada mention where he would go next life for preaching? And Nitai told me Prabhupada said he would go on the lower planets to preach in the next birth. That was the most viral thing. He said very, very clearly, yeah, Prabhupada said he would go on the lower planets to preach the message of Krishna.
We had just finished completely changing the temple room, putting in arches, creating a new area for the deities. Radha Paraseswara had been sitting in the Pujari room, which is located behind the altar, while the work was going on. And of course, you know what it's like when Prabhupada's coming. I mean, in Chicago, they were still laying the floor while Prabhupada was practically walking in the door. So everybody's always working to the last minute. So they had just finished the work, and the deities were still in the Pujari room. And they said, Prabhupada's here. So then Sital and I were carrying Paraseswara back to the altar, and then she was just making the hair and making sure the crowns were neat and everything. And we had just finished, and then Prabhupada walked in 30 seconds later. It was like nerve-wracking. But the temple room looked beautiful, the deities looked fabulous. Prabhupada was in ecstasy, the devotees were in ecstasy. It was magical, very magical time.
I became Miss Denmark, and that proposed me to a career as a model. I became the most expensive model in London and Paris, and I was working every single day for Vogue, Elle, Marie Claire. In 1974, I had a cover of Paris Match, which is a big newspaper, and it was sold in 24 countries with my cover with a sari on, and the line was, I left everything for Krishna, and there was 4 pages inside, me making garlands in front of the deities, dancing around Tulsi, dancing and chanting Harinam in front of the Eiffel Tower. So when Parimat came out, of course they sent it to Prabhupada in Bombay, where he had it on his desk for 1 week. And he would say to the people coming, she gave up everything for Krishna, now you should do the same thing. Prabhupada would be preaching like that.
It was a serious, not so easy path, a path of spiritual emancipation. And the more I learned and the more I understood, it may not be finished in one life. So I asked him if, when I leave my body and I'm not a pure devotee, in my next life, is that you who is going to be my spiritual master? And Prabhupada reflected like this. And he said, you don't have to worry, all the arrangements are already made. Every day you had chanting, Janme Janme Prabhu say. That was important for me. The relationship with this person, it's eternal, it's not going to be broken. You know, I will try my utmost all my life, but then if something happens, is he going to be there, you know, next life? But I say yes. Oh, that was very, very important for me.
I can see myself here getting my initiation beads, and this is I think the best moment of my whole life, to actually get my beads from Srila Prabhupada and to feel like this connection was made. I think I cried the whole way through the ceremony. I remember when my neck beads were put on, Krishna Bhamani put my neck beads on. She's saying to me, you can't cry in front of the deities. And I just looking at Srila Prabhupada, and just this moment of actually getting initiated was so overwhelming that I just couldn't stop the tears. And I remember looking at Prabhupada's eyes. It looked like Srila Prabhupada had tears in his eyes. His eyes were wet. They were like floating with water.
Srila Prabhupada liked to receive the devotees in his room, and very often when the devotees were coming, they were also bringing their children. So there is some very nice, sweet exchanges between Prabhupada and the children. The little children would go next to Prabhupada or go under his desk and play with his feet and do some little nice things children do. And Prabhupada was always very, very sweet and kind with them. And of course, most of the time he would give them some prasadam. But of course, the biggest thing about children with Prabhupada was his teaching of how to manage the Gurukul. And because I did the Gurukul for 10 years, I have a lot of experience with Srila Prabhupada and the children. And the thing that were the most important was, one, that devotional activities should never be forced on children. It should always present it to them in a way that they like it. And the other was that to use our common sense in dealing with the children, because so many things were done wrong because of trying to apply in a very, very rigid way the principles of Krishna consciousness as they were applied to adults. And this brought a lot of havoc in the Gurukuls. But Prabhupada, when he saw these problems, reminded everybody, use your common sense.
We had a very big engagement for him in the biggest hall of Paris, which was called Salle Pleyel. Srila Prabhupada sat on the Vyasasana on the stage, and immediately at the back of the hall, French students start shouting, "Get down, not on the throne." So, Prabhupada said, "Well, you can sit on this throne. Anybody can sit on the throne if he's qualified." Then they quieted down, and he started his lecture by quoting the Bible. The beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. Because France is traditionally actually a very pious country. Many monks and monasteries were started there. So he knew how to attract the heart of French people, at least some of them, not the revolutionary ones, which are not the only ones. And it worked. Many devotees were made at this engagement. I was one of them. And then later on, he said to the devotees, "Next time, you just put a simple carpet on the stage for me."
He had the Sankirtan leaders of that time from Bhagavan Zone, a little meeting with us. First, he congratulated the devotees for the results. And he asked the first question, I think the only question he asked us. And he said, "Are you reading my books?" Then Rigupati said, "Prabhupada, we don't have much time. We don't have time to read." Then I heard I was near. Prabhupada went, "What is the use?" I could see he was deeply hurt. It was a major priority. Our life was to be used to investigate this message, these books, these thousands of hours of working. So of course we're distributing. But then Prabhupada was more interested, whether we were reading his books.
Being a pujari, I was missing everything, the morning walks, the room conversations, everything, and I was getting more and more stressed. People weren't turning up for their service, and I was getting more and more resentful as the day went by. So it was the last night that he was there. I was crying. I wanted to see Prabhupada, and then Bhagavan came into the kitchen. He immediately just understood. Somehow there must have been like a black cloud surrounding me. So Bhagavan ordered me, "I want you to go up and see Prabhupada right now." The thought of going up and seeing Prabhupada in this state was like terrifying. And he said, "No, I'm going. You come up with me." I thought, okay, and I started walking behind him up to Prabhupada's room, and I was like getting smaller and smaller and feeling like I want to disappear completely. And as soon as I walked into Prabhupada's quarters, it was from night to day. I became so satisfied and so happy, almost like a child sitting in the lap of his mother. And we were sitting, and then I think it was Yogeshwara asked Prabhupada if he would sing. So Prabhupada came and sat down in the middle of the room, and the few of us that were there just surrounded him, and Prabhupada did bhajan for maybe half an hour, and they did recordings. It was just like the most intimate and wonderful and beautiful experience to be there with Prabhupada singing with such emotion. And I remember Yogeshwar saying, "Prabhupada, your voice is so amazing. It's so extraordinary." And Prabhupada looked very shy, and he went, "Oh, no, that's all right." Like, he just wasn't accepting that. It was just very, very sweet and such a humble mood of Prabhupada. Somehow or another, my attitude had gone way off track. And although at the time I wouldn't have thought of it, but now I see it as Prabhupada carrying Vrindavan with him in a way that, we were all in that little bubble, and you didn't feel that you were any more in Paris or, in the material world, but you were in that little Braj bubble that Prabhupada allowed us to enter into by his presence. So extraordinary.
Prabhupada came, and we picked him up in a fleet of Volkswagen buses, which were all brand new, because our Sankirtan activities were fabulously successful. And Prabhupada was very impressed by that. When we rolled into Schloss Rettershof, the owners who kept horses and had an academy for training, horse riding and jumping, for some reason, they took it upon themselves to line up with their horses, and when Prabhupada came by, the horses all made a bow. They were obviously very well-trained horses, and Prabhupada really liked that. And we also, of course, liked it.
This particular footage from Germany would have been lost if it would not have been handed over to us by one Christian priest who was in ownership of this footage. He mentioned that the film began to deteriorate and it might be beneficial for us to take possession of it before it would be lost forever. I thought this is a nice example of cooperation between different religious beliefs. This is me talking to a journalist from a Christian organization in Germany. When I listen now after so many years to my interview, I'm amazed how forceful, but also perhaps a little fanatical, I presented the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. My personal understanding of fanatical is that when we were young devotees, we were very enthusiastic and convinced about practicing and spreading Krishna consciousness, but naturally not very mature, not very experienced in doing so. This in itself should not be seen as a fault or mistake. It's natural. We have seen on several occasions how Srila Prabhupada defended the behavior of his disciples, who were very serious and sincere, yet he certainly expected that in due course of time they would become more and more mature.
At that time, Professor Durkheim came, and he is a huge, well-known personality in psychological departments of practically every university. He brought Zen Buddhism to Europe. He at that time had many German bishops, Catholic bishops, becoming very interested in Zen Buddhism. He had about 30 of them coming for retreats. So he was hugely influential. And I thought this Durkheim is the guru of the Catholic bishops, let him become the disciple of Srila Prabhupada. So when he came, he was quite reserved, but within minutes, they struck up a very cordial relationship. They were contemporaries. Durkheim was about maybe 6 years younger than Prabhupada. And Prabhupada talked with him so nicely that they immediately developed a very wonderful relationship. And Durkheim started to listen to Prabhupada. And I remember they walked over the fields. And Durkheim also had so many ideas in his head, and he started trying to impress Prabhupada. And Prabhupada looked at him at one stage and said, "Look," he said, "this is not very intelligent." And Durkheim said, "Why?" And Prabhupada explained to him why it's not intelligent. And Durkheim laughed and said, "I suppose you're right." It was beautiful to see these two elderly men talking to each other like friends. And I remember at the end of one discussion, Durkheim actually paid his Dandavat to Prabhupada. And while he was in the Dandavat position, he looked up, he said, "Please accept me as your younger brother," which was kind of really nice, seeing such a huge personality accepting Prabhupada's superiority. So when I brought Durkheim back to the railway station, he was talking about Prabhupada. He said, "It is quite amazing, this visit." He said, "I've met many people in my life of spiritual standing." He said, "But I've never met a person like this master." He said, "He is, er ist durch." That means he is through, he made it.